You know what I like about the DuckTales series? Is that we're usually introduced to characters we do not really remember, but may have seen in a distant past, and sometimes turning them into either dislikable characters or likable characters. I don't really know what can put the bleh, put this guy in, but it's definitely not as bad as I thought he was. This is the DuckTales Season 2, Episode 2, called The Depths of Cousin 30, and we're introduced to a character we haven't really seen in a very, very long time. I don't even think it was in the original series. One of Donald's cousin 30, who has always been pretty of a in the head. This episode stars only Dewey and Huey as they hear a telephone call in Scrooge's office that details that it's 30, who Scrooge is sent to a submarine place at the last 5 years, but every time they're rushed over there, they have always gotten into trouble. So they are ignoring uh, 30 and think he's a nuisance. But Dewey, drawn into the fact that it's wild adventure, and Huey drawn in because, well, he believes 30 is a scientist, all tricks Launchpad into going there with the submarine. And they do indeed meet 30, who is the red-headed, no, not red-headed, but the red-clothed guy, who also turns out to be a Junior Woodchuck guidebook user. I found that pretty strange. He also calls himself Donald's favorite cousin, but it's clear Donald does not call him the favorite cousin. In fact, does Donald even have any favorite cousins? He hates Gladstone, so it's only logical that he is not so very fond of 30 either. Donald is arrogant that way. Not that I won't disagree with it. And the boys do indeed get into trouble, but it turns out that 30 is actually very, well, you know, he loves animals so much, even despite all the dangerous sea animals in and all. It turns out that uh, it's that he has learned them all and is actually very good at handling them. But it also turns out that Huey actually misunderstood. But this is actually a subversion. Normally, a person in this type of way would trick another one with saying, "Yes, I'm a scientist." But 30 is not a scientist, and he doesn't even say he is a scientist. It's just Huey who assumes he is, which is actually a pretty subversion of this trope, which I find is pretty likable. And but then when the boys try to head back, at angry of it all, they're suddenly attacked by a giant krill, who turned out to be Mitzi, one of the krills that 30 used to be friends with. At first, it looks like they're all gonna die, but then Huey remembers a little bit what 30 has said, as 30 has shown that despite not being a scientist, he's a Junior Woodchuck person, as well as he seems very adverse in handling the sea life here, despite not being a scientist. So Huey follows his example by singing to the so-called Mitzi, and indeed he gets saved. But the lab gets destroyed, so 30 travels with Mitzi to find another adventurous scientist. Only question is, will he become one? Who knows? It's actually so yeah. This episode was actually better than I thought it was. I'm almost a 7 out of 10, or maybe 6.8 out of 10. It's 30 was not as annoying as I thought it was. Most of all, what I liked most was the fact that he never admitted that he was a scientist. It was just the others who misunderstood it. He's just of a kind-hearted simpleton, to speak, but he's not exactly a simpleton that much, because he's actually well versed in a lot of different things. I know there's a word for this kind of behavior, but I don't really have the right word for it. Uh, and not only a genius, it's the kind of guy who is jack of all trades, knows a lot even if he doesn't knows it, and he's also very energetic. So he stays very true to his roots in the comic counterpart. Is And he couldn't be any more different than the other cousin of Donald and Donald himself. Donald is ill-tempered and born unlucky. Gladstone is arrogant and born always lucky, while Faraday is accident-prone, yet at the same time all sunshine and cuckoo bananas. In another way, that way. His best way to describe him is of the Duck cousin trio. He is the nice, while Donald is the in-between, while Gladstone is the mean of the nice, mean, and in-between section of it all. So yeah, it was pretty nice of it all. Huey having his misunderstood moments could have been a little annoying about this episode, which I don't really like. But Dewey always tried to find a word named after him. It was kind of funny. The funniest thing was when they were strangled by worms, sea worms, when well, 30 was so very calm. So this is basically this episode. But you can give me your thoughts if you have any.